You are very welcome along to the RTÉ Rugby World Cup podcast in association with Bank of Ireland. That's right, we have a new name for the next couple of months. We're going to be cranking the podcast out over the next few weeks. On Tuesday, we spoke to Darren Cave and James Downey looking ahead to the Rugby World Cup this morning. I also had an interview with Devin Toner, rte.ie/sport, or on the RTÉ Sport YouTube channel if you want to catch that as well. And now another Rugby World Cup podcast. Jonny Holland is with me to pour over the Ireland lineup to play Romania. And we'll look ahead to some of the bigger games coming up this weekend. We'll go around the grounds, the various games in a couple of minutes. First, though, we'll go through the Ireland team that was actually named this afternoon for Saturday's game against Romania in Bordeaux, live on RTÉ Radio 1. So at fullback, Hugo Keenan, as expected. Keith Earls and James Lowe are on the wings. Gary Ringrose and Bundyaki in the centre. Johnny Sexton returns from suspension to play his first game in 6 months. He's captaining the side from out half alongside Jamison Gibson-Park in the half-backs. Up front, Andrew Porter, Rob Herring and Tyg Furlong in the front row. Joe McCarthy comes in for his just his second start in an Irish shirt and his fourth cap. He's in the second row alongside James Ryan. And as a result, Tyg Byrne goes to the back row, blindside flanker for him. Peter O'Mahony swaps across to open side and Caelan Doris at number 8. On the bench then, Ronan Kelleher back from injury, Jeremy Lockman and Tom O'Toole. And then you've got plenty of experience. Ian Henderson, Josh van der Fleer, Conor Murray, Robbie Henshaw, and Jack Crowley is the other one of the replacements. Before I chat to Johnny about this team, let's hear what Andy Farrell and Johnny Sexton had to say about Joe McCarthy's inclusion and a few more things besides these questions from RTÉ Sports' Justin Treacy.
Andy, obviously a selection that sees lots of experience, obviously, and some new faces. Joe McCarthy starting in the second row. Could you just give us your thoughts on why you've gone with Joe?
Well, because he deserves it with a form that he's shown not just in the games that he's played, but also in his preparation over the last 10-11 weeks. He's really progressed his game. He gets an opportunity to start in the first game of the World Cup.
You've gone with Rob Herring starting as hooker and Keith Earls. Lots and lots of experience there.
Well, we've got lots of experience and a nice blend of youth within our squad. So when we get down to this stage now, we've got a group of 33. We've got a pretty good squad, so therefore it's always going to be a strong team.
Johnny, the obvious question: great to be back and starting and leading the team out in the opening game of the World Cup.
Yeah, delighted to be back. Playing for Ireland is always special. I think extra special when it comes to World Cup. So very, very happy to be back in the team and really looking forward to it now.
So we just heard from Andy Farrell and Johnny Sexton, that clip, Johnny, and I suppose before we get into the weeds of the actual selections themselves and the individual selections, you're talking realistically 12 of what we would consider to be a fully fit Ireland's strongest 15 in there. Maybe put in the likes of Mac Hansen, a fit Dan Sheehan, and arguably Josh van der Fleer coming in and Tyg Byrne moving back into the second row ahead of Joe McCarthy. Against a team like Romania, that's a hell of a statement of intent.
It is, yeah, and I think we were kind of predicting that it would be strong, but I don't think we predicted this strength that they've put out. I think, you put maybe 3 changes and you're at full strength, and 1 or 2 of those aren't actually possible this weekend. So it's very, very strong. I expected there to be probably 2 or 3 of the pack not selected. I thought Andrew Porter, Tyg Furlong, I wasn't sure if they were going to be put out. I expected probably 2 out of the kind of the other 5 in the pack. I expected 2 changes there. I suppose we saw Joe McCarthy coming in and we see Josh van der Fleer being left out, but the other 4 are starters anyway, aren't they? So maybe not as many changes as what I thought I'd see. And actually I didn't think Jamison Gibson-Park would play. I thought you'd get a combination of the other 2. I thought Murray would start with Sexton and leave Jamison Gibson-Park, start with Sexton against Tonga. So I am surprised. It makes me think about what he's actually going to do against Tonga, but that's for after Saturday.
Well, without being complacent, looking ahead to that game against Tonga and South Africa then as well, I would imagine a lot of the head coaches of the contending nations they're kind of road mapping a lot of their selections out. And I think from Andy Farrell's point of view, possibly you've got the easiest game of the lot, first up against Romania. Obviously, no disrespect to them, but they are way back in the world rankings. They've had a disaster of a warm-up campaign coming in, losing to teams that haven't even qualified for the tournament. And had it not been for Spain playing a banger in the qualification process, Romania would have had to go through the playoffs themselves. So we're not talking out of school here, disrespecting them, but you know, you can play a first team in this, put up a good score, potentially then mix and match things a little bit, rest up a couple of more important players against Tonga to give them a bit of a weekend off heading into South Africa. Like, are we kind of playing 4D chess, looking ahead at all these things, or is it can a head coach do that and not be called complacent ultimately?
No, it's very hard, but I think with the squad that he's got, he's not going to be complacent, because you put Josh van der Fleer, Ian Henderson back in, Ronan Keller has to get a start at some stage, Dan Sheehan has to get a start at some stage, and you're talking about before South Africa in 2 games' time, so like they can't all get a start from now. And then you're looking at Robbie Henshaw. If you picked Robbie Henshaw and put Bundy Aki on the bench, no one would say it's a weakened selection. So you've actually a couple of positions where you can actually change them, and no one in their right mind would say you're weaker. So I thought this was the one that there might be 1 or 2. I thought he would have halved it. Not really halved it, but I thought he would have gotten stronger as we went. But he's gone so strong now that I think he's going to stay as strong for Tonga, because they're a real threat. They're the strongest Tongan side we've probably seen, with a couple of fellas kind of changing their allegiances according to the laws. But so I think the way he's going now is going to be, I think from my perspective anyway, they're trying to get cohesion, and they're going to get it this week, and they're going to get it next week. But I think like the big thing here is you can see, the selections, and think fellas need certain amount of minutes. Just because they tog out doesn't mean they're going to play 60 and be wrecked, so you're going to see a lot of changes probably by half time if things go to plan and you get enough. If they see enough and they see enough connections and cohesion, like we always say, those buzzwords, then I think you can make the changes quite early. I don't think they're going to be thinking about racking up a score, because I think if the Irish backroom team management are talking about racking up scores, it's because they expect to lose somewhere else, and I don't think they'll be planning for that. We might be thinking of it in 60-point spread and all the rest of it, but I don't think they're going to be thinking that way. They back themselves 100% to beat Scotland, but you can see now it's kind of for me, it's a kind of a split pool, or split kind of, you're probably, I wouldn't say you're guaranteed it, but like you'll have 3 games, then you will have Scotland, and more than likely, which is a massive assumption, you're hoping you'll have a quarter final. So I'm nearly thinking of it now as a bit of a split. Ramp up, do your thing against Romania, get lads off the pitch like Johnny Sexton, James Gibson Park, whoever else, Ty Furlong maybe. Go at it again, give them 40-50 minutes again against Tonga, try and do the work early and get them off early. I suppose the risk there is that you don't do the work early against Tonga, and all of a sudden you're taking some hits that you don't want to be taking a week out from South Africa, So I think it's hilarious trying to call all these things, because we can have our assumptions. We're not down on the ground. We're not Andy Farrell. We're not his group. They have their own ways of thinking about it. You have to call it some way, but it's very hard to get inside his head. Clearly he's kind of keeping us on our toes. Since the Mac Hansen selection in the Six Nations, no one can guess what he's going to actually do, and he's done it again this time.
Yeah, and one of those, Joe McCarthy, like, it ultimately came from the blue. I was speaking to Devin Toner earlier in the week, and I was asking him about when Joe McCarthy made his debut for Leinster just back in January of 2022. And here he is, just 18 months down the line, still 22 years old. But okay, it's against Romania, but he's starting a game at the Rugby World Cup. And even a few months ago, I think, while most of us were pretty impressed with the level of his progression over the previous 12 months, I think the fact that maybe he had missed out in the Six Nations through injury, some of us probably thought that his chance at the World Cup had gone. But you look at the performances he put in during the summer, first of all against Italy when he got his start, and I think secondly, which is just as important, 25 minutes against England in the second of those warm-up games, and made a savage impact in those 25 minutes, hit everything that moved, was a constant threat, brought incredible physicality, and is the type of naturally physical player that we've probably struggled to produce over the last few years. And as Andy Farrell has said, it's not even just over the matches he's played, but the level of professionalism he's brought during the campaign, the last 10, 11 weeks in camp as well. It's a thoroughly deserved start for him, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes.
I think it's you can see his form changing completely. I know he's been playing a good bit of rugby and everything else, but he's young, like you said, and he's the closest thing to an Andy Farrell bolter to a World Cup, because it's been fairly mapped out for the last while. But like you're saying there, he made his debut in January 22. It'll kind of put it into perspective that that's probably what a bolter is these days. But I thought he was kind of immature in his play, which isn't that surprising when he is young, but I thought he was a bit immature in his play around the ruck and stuff, maybe defensively as well. I thought he got caught in.
Would have been prone to conceding a lot of penalties.
Yeah, I thought so, and I thought defensively prone to maybe making assumptions and getting caught out a small bit around the ruck. Unlike James Ryan when he came on the scene and he battered everything that went back inside there. So I thought he was kind of had his frailties like that, but it was like you saw the turnaround. You could see it fairly clearly this summer, the way he's turned up. It's like the person we were expecting to turn up for no reason. We just expected it out of him, all the talk about him, but he came good at the right time, and I think his trajectory now makes him a serious option for Ireland. Obviously, they're seeing him training for a World Cup camp, like they see him all day long, most days. And I think Andy Farrell does well that way. He does put a lot of emphasis on how they train and how they turn up, and obviously, like you said, the professionalism. But I think his output in the games has been seriously impressive. Obviously, we knew he was going to be the wrecking ball, physical guy. He's a big lad, but bringing the discipline to his game and a bit of, I suppose, the structured parts where you don't let the system down. I think that's what has really gotten him over the line, and it's going to be exciting to see what he does. I know it's Romania, and I know we're trying not to disrespect him. It's one of those games where if he doesn't play really well, he probably won't get selected in the Tonga game unless there's a bigger plan. But and then if he plays very well, it's only Romania, you know what I mean? But he's still within like a very strong side. So if he stands out within that pack, then he's up to something, and maybe there's a change on the cards going forward,
Yeah. And speaking change on the cards going forward leads us nicely to the idea of Tadhg Beirne moving from the second row into the back row, which is what Joe McCarthy starting has facilitated. Now, it's something that's been spoken of a lot in the last couple of years about that it's an option for Farrell to have, where he had Ian Henderson and Tadhg Beirne, who had that versatility of second and back row. Do you think, granted they're two different teams, but playing Beirne in the back row is potentially a little bit of a trial run for the option of potentially doing that against South Africa later on in the pool?
I do think it's a trial run for a kind of a set piece strength. If you put Tadhg Beirne in there with keeping Pete, Caelan Doris, like all these lads are there's, and then you've got two second rows in there as well. I think Ian Henderson can do that role as well, but Tadhg Beirne is probably a more out and out six when you put it that way, when they're talking about hybrids. And you're nearly doing to South Africa what they've done to the rest of the world by picking a second row at six. But Tadhg Beirne has never been an out and out second row anyway. Like, is he? I mean, played at number 8 for Scarlets, if I remember correctly. So like, he naturally does that role best, I suppose, or the most natural person to put into that role. And maybe it is just to see how the set piece goes, because you think about it, he's another second row, but we're calling him a six now in the line out. Defensively as much as anything, but then you still have the wrecking ball, Joe McCarthy, in the middle tearing apart someone's maul. So like, you get a lot out of that, and maybe it is a bit of a trial run, but it'll be interesting to see where they go from that.
They'd love him if he was South African, Tadhg Beirne, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they would. Yeah.
Just thinking about it when you were talking there, I'm just, like, Rassie Erasmus, I would imagine, would just absolutely love to find a South African grandparent down the line in Tadhg Beirne's lineage. One last bit on Joe McCarthy, and got us thinking of the Emerging Ireland tour from South Africa last September. September into early October, and obviously it was fairly much maligned at the time. People were critical of, was it a pointless venture? Were people on this tour going to be going to the World Cup? You look at Joe McCarthy, who was involved there, Jack Crowley, who's obviously on the bench this weekend as well, and then guys who missed out on the Ireland squad itself, but the likes of Tom Stewart, Cian Prendergast, Nash, Osborne, who were in there. Is that Emerging Ireland tour something that has aged quite well over the last 12 months?
Absolutely, it aged very well. I think like the Irish management will look back on that, everyone involved in organising the tour, and will think, they had the foresight to see how it was going to work. And I think like at the time we probably understood the idea of it, backed the idea of it, but the games probably didn't play out to be as competitive as you'd like. But like, even getting Joe McCarthy I know he was probably going to get there anyway, but I think Jack Crowley was the real one that came out of it, because from there he took that into his club form, changed things around in his club. It really was from that tour, having all that time with the coaches. I know they've backed him and they've liked him. I think Mike Cat's a fan of him as well. So it was just that time around the environment that got him through his club, which in a sense got him back into Ireland, like, in time with them. So like, it's been mad. And when you spoke with the people that got left out there, they were all wouldn't say they were huge shocks, but people were frustrated that there was no space for them. So they were all knocking on the door, and that's the kind of squad that Andy Farrell wanted to build, because he said in the past that it's going to take 40 players. Now, whether that's in the warm-up through to the end of the World Cup or not, and people flying over and back, I'm not so sure where the understanding is there. But like he's mentioned that it's going to take that many players, and he's already used that many that are viable options, you know.
Earlier in the week, as I said, we had James Downey and Darren Cave on Tuesday's podcast, still up there on wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube as well for those that missed it. But we were talking obviously about centres and who would be Ireland's first choice for the South Africa game or any one of those really big games. They thought it was, well, for a start, it was Gary Ringrose plus one other, and the one other that they landed on was Robbie Henshaw. Now, for this week, Bundyaki is in with Ringrose. You have Henshaw on the bench. A comment from the YouTube and on the podcast from a couple of days ago as well, and we want to hear from as many people as possible on these things, so get your comments into us. Leave it on the YouTube, tweet us, tweet me at Neil_Treacy, or hashtag RTÉ Rugby to get your comments into us. But someone, who's it here? Kieran3773. Henshaw's probably the more all-round talent, but in my opinion, Aki has been our most effective player at 12 during the Schmidt and Farrell eras. Where would you sit in terms of centre?
Traditionally, I would have thought Henshaw and Ringrose, but I like, whether it's me not watching enough games or what, Robbie Henshaw's availability has been low as well. I just don't think he's played enough rugby for you to have an evidence base on that. I think Bundyaki, like, you know, is definitely one of these players as well. And when you get on the pitch with him, or I've faced him, I know how much he hurts. Like, you know, and that counts for a lot. You know, it's the intangibles from us watching on the TV. But he's a physical man. He's a beast, like, you know. So that counts for a lot. Now, it doesn't mean that Robbie Henshaw's not, and he's a very intelligent player, and they both have a lot of strings to their bow in attack. I think Robbie Henshaw possibly is a better defensive centre. I was criticised for being critical of Bundyaki when it was the Italy game he came back in for, and he made a couple of defensive errors.
It was. He had a wild game against Italy in the Six Nations.
Yeah.
On the ball, it was probably as good as he has looked in 18 months, but he had some defensive slips.
Yeah, he did. And like, I suppose I don't want to make an assumption based on this one game that's standing out to me, but there was a couple of defensive errors in there that you wouldn't have put him down for, like, you know. But in attack, he was so good, and he had a try there recently where he's on the inside support line as well from Pete, wasn't it, when he went through, or the kind of tip pass went through the line, and Bundyaki was on the end of it. So he's a very good player, and I think when you get that kind of that physicality inside, a bit of go forward, and he's physically confrontational. I don't think he likes any centre to go through. And if you look at the two centres that South Africa might play, and I know we're jumping ahead here talking about South Africa, but that's basically what it's going to
like it's all relevant, you know.
That's where we're going, like, you know, and trying to find a game that's going to stop them. Now, like, Robbie Henshaw is so physical as well and has all those strings to his bow. So it's going to be a very tight one. I was only chatting to my home friends today, and they're talking about, like, you know, Robbie Henshaw he's like Johnny Sexton. For some reason, they can not play rugby and come back and just give you a 9 out of 10. And I'd fully back him to do that in any game. But it is harder when Bundyaki has a lot under his belt, and you know, you can back him to do the job as well. But it's a lovely position to be in, because, like I said to you, you know, you could pick any three of those centres, and everyone thinks it's just a selection, that it's not going to take him right off the ball. But yeah, you have the option, I suppose, of going very physical if you want to go with Robbie Henshaw and Bundyaki, but I think Gary Ringrose is just so good. If you look at, sometimes you might catch, like, the camera when it goes behind and you get some replays and you see some of the positions that Gary Ringrose takes up and he gets to the other side of the pitch, you wouldn't think there's that much time to kind of swing and attack, or the reads that he makes in defence. People will talk about his missed tackles, and then you'll have other people talking about, oh yeah, but we want him to hunt them in, a still a missed tackle, and all this kind of discussion. But, like, I just think he's, you know, you talk about players to watch in the tournament, he's just someone I love watching, you know. So I do think he's a bit of he has to be nailed on, unless you go with a different game plan against South Africa and you need to be a right bully, like. But I don't think that's the way Ireland play, and I don't think it's the way they're going to go against South Africa, because that's playing them at their own game in a sense. Yeah,
Ringrose, I hate the cliche X factor, but, like, if you were to line up the four Irish centres together and, you know, play top trumps with what they have, like, he is the one that just has that little bit something special, that's something extra on top. On Aki, when you said you played against him, curious to actually just know, what position was he playing when you played against him? Because I do remember he was a wing he played on the wing when he first came to Connacht, and I'm just wondering, were you the out half with him standing opposite you at 12, crashing down your throat, or did you have a little bit of protection and distance between you on the pitch?
Oh, I didn't have any protection or this. Well, I had a bit of protection in Rory Scannell stepping across my channel, but he was at 12, and I remember he carried the ball at one stage, and I tackled him, and I still got a knock in the back of my head, and it was front on tackle. Like, I didn't know how it happened. I actually went off for a HIA check that day, but I didn't have a concussion. Like, I came back on, or I came back out anyway. But it was from Bundyaki, like having a bit of a rampaging run, ducking his head and moving here and there. He can move, like, and he's still, I don't know what weight is he, 105 kilos. He's definitely up there. So it's not a great size of a man to be running at you when he can actually change direction quite late as well. Like, so I don't miss any days in the sports ground trying to tackle that thing moving. So that's the thing though. Like, there's people would say I didn't like playing against him, or when you're facing someone down on the ground, you don't realize how big international centres are. Like, I remember looking up John and Davies stats, and you think, oh, he can move and he plays a small bit of ball anyway, and he's 110 kilos. Like, couldn't understand it in the slightest. Francis Sailly signed with us, and I remember standing on the scales with him, and he was 102 kilos. He was 5'10", and like, he's shredded as well. So I was like, yeah, he's probably 90, 95, 98 or something. He's up over 100, and you understand then why they get game line, and the Damon Delandes of the world, when they're doing all that reconciling in the breakdown, you start to understand a bit more when you're watching on TV, when you remember the size of them. We trained against Munster a couple of weeks back without their World Cup players over in Cork, and we spoke with that, I think. But like, I've been in that environment, and it's probably been a couple of years, obviously, but like, even people around me that have been around that environment, we were looking at the size of them, like, and these are club players. When you look at the international players, they're big men, and it's massively understated. But that centre battle, going into Tonga and then further into South Africa, like, you're talking about big physical players. Gary Ringrose bucks a trend there a small bit, but he's just so good at what he does. He reads the game really well. I think he has to be now, lad.
Yeah, I did kind of a rude awakening when we first started going back to like in-person press events and press conferences after COVID, and they're just, I think we'd all kind of forgotten, a lot of us journalists, how big some of these players had been over the couple of years we were doing everything over Zoom and Teams. We'll move away from Ireland and onto some of the other games. First, though, I do want to let you know some news for any of our listeners who have young kids interested in rugby. I want to tell you about a new series from RTÉ Kids called Ruck and Roll, which is going to accompany the Rugby World Cup on RTÉ's platforms. It'll be published on the RTÉ Player and the RTÉ Kids YouTube channel. That's going to be weekly from this Saturday, the 9th of September. And it's hoping to bring the excitement of the Rugby World Cup to young audiences across the country. Presenters Sean Treacy and Mary Claire Fitzpatrick are going to be visiting a new rugby club every week. They will be talking to some of the biggest fans in the country and putting them to the test with some quizzes and challenges. And we'll be chatting to some of the women's 15s rugby team as well, and the men's 7s players. So that is Ruck and Roll. It starts this Saturday. Weekly episodes on the RTÉ Player and the RTÉ Kids YouTube channel if you want to find out a bit more about it. The fun, obviously, of the tournament starts this Friday, Johnny, and talk about a game to get us underway with. France against New Zealand, 8:15 p.m. kickoff Irish time, live on RT2 and RTÉ Player. Coverage on very early from 6:45 as well, I believe. So loads and loads to get through on the night there on RT2. On France, for months I've had them down as my winners. That's like, I've been fairly, even after Ireland beat them in the Six Nations, I just thought France were going to get better. They were missing a couple of players at the time as well. But I don't know, is it just the fact that the World Cup is upon us now? But it's got to this week, and when the team came in yesterday that they had to play against New Zealand, you look at, okay, we know Cyril Boy was going to be out, big loss in the front row. Roman Ntamack obviously gone, Paul Villemse out as well in the second row, a massive player figuratively and literally, and Jonathan Dante, the latest to go. Now, I know Cyril Boy and Dante are probably going to be back soon enough as well, but am I right, or am I right to be doubting them, or is it just the fact that the tournament is creeping a little bit closer that I'm thinking too much about it?
Well, I have the same feelings, and I thought the exact same at the Six Nations. I thought that they kind of held their cards closer to their chest in the Six Nations. I thought they were happy enough to be where they were at. I don't think, for whatever reason at the time, I thought their feelings weren't that they needed to go out and win it. And obviously they have home advantage. There's going to be pressure with that, but obviously it gets you over the line as well in tight games. So I had the exact same feelings as you. And then when you look at the the size of the players, both literally and metaphorically, that are missing for them at the start anyway, then I think like the momentum is falling away from them a small bit, but geez, doubt them at your peril. Like, you know, it's they're ridiculous. Like we've been talking about their squad for so long, you can't start doubting them because they're down 4 players, is it? So,
Yeah.
and some of them are going to be back. But I think Jonathan Dante is a huge loss. I think the gap between him and Mofana, isn't it? I think the gap is big. I just think he's so destructive, and it's the stuff that you don't hit, like the stuff that you don't see. Of course, you see it, but like it's in the breakdown. First phase, he'll make his tackle or he'll get over the gain line for them, and it's actually the breakdown where he just gets in there for La Rochelle, and he's so disruptive. I think the Intermac one, as much as we've got this kind of romanticized version of what he was going to do at the World Cup, you know, Jalibert's a good player. He's like
Jalibert is and I think even at the time, I remember doing the podcast and Bernard Jackman was on with us as well, and even straight after Intermac got that injury, he was saying, like, obviously it's an enormous blow for the player, and he's such a quality player, but you know, Jalibert is good enough to play for arguably nearly any other country in the tournament. And it's just the fact that he's behind Intermac. Like it's not an enormous loss compared to other areas of the pitch.
Not if he stays fit, but like that's you're relying on him for a lot of rugby as well. Like France have a tough way through to winning anything as well. They have a very hard side to draw, much like we do. So like, you know, you prefer and you'd be a lot more confident if you go into your campaign and you have both of them available. Obviously, you've got 2 world-class 10s in, and like that's very, very hard to stop, because I think you've seen with Ireland in the past, 2015, I think in particular, you know, you lose players and they're big players for Ireland and all of it. Like even if you look at the squad at the moment, like we'd back our squad a lot, but like if you lose any combination of Porter, Furlong, Sexton, you know yourself, you're starting to doubt it a small bit more. So that's what's happening in France at the moment. And you know, Paul Willems is obviously huge inside in the pack as well, and all of a sudden they don't look like the rumbling pack that we're used to seeing. But I still think, like, you know, if you look at their pack versus New Zealand on tomorrow night, they still have the pack. You know, they're still going to be the bigger size, and the ones that are probably going to put the squeeze on the game, you'll see a very French kind of rumble when they get into the 22. So it's, geez, what a game to start the tournament with, especially when it has such a bearing on Ireland's potential path to any success. It's a really nice one to start with. But the one that I'd be looking at, like, I know they won't directly go at each other, but Aldred and Ardy Sevilla, two of the Form 8s, really. If you look at Kellen Doris as well, they're massive players going at it in a World Cup opener on a Friday night.
How do you see New Zealand reacting to what happened against South Africa? They've made 4 changes. 2 of those are enforced, Jordy Barrett being out and Tyrrell Lomax being out injured. Anton Leonard-Brown comes in, Nepo Laulala comes in, and then the tactical changes, Cody Taylor and Dalton Papali brought into the pack as well. So there's obviously been a reaction from Ian Foster, but if you're talking 4 changes and 2 of them being injuries, it certainly doesn't seem like there's an overreaction to what happened at Twickenham a couple of weeks back. No,
but I think there was an overreaction to what they were doing to Australia as well. You know, so okay. Like, we don't really know where New Zealand are at. Yeah, like they look, they're tournament animals in one sense anyway. I know they've had a couple of tough ones, but they've had a couple of wins as well. You know, they know what's going on in the World Cup, and I think that's going to stand to them. Joe Schmidt is very clever tactically. You know, they've a lot of know-how. I think what the All Blacks are always very good at, and you could see that tomorrow night. You saw with the Lions tour, was it the first test or the second test? The first test, I think they just changed the script completely, played everything off the ruck, and you were expecting a couple of more passes, and they really tightened up their game plan, but it wasn't seen as a negative. It was a real tactical awareness of what the Lions were going to try and bring in terms of line speed, and they played inside it. So, like, I think they're very good at maybe changing the picture and just ambushing a team. South Africa did it to them, but I think that's where their weakness is going to be. Like, will they deal with the packs at the top level? And will their tactical awareness get them through some of the bigger games repeatedly? Maybe once they will, but will they be able to do it against 3 of the top sides to get all the way? Like, you know,
when we're looking at after this game at what happens back, the layout of the pool stage, it's similar to when New Zealand and South Africa were together in the same pool back in 2019, where they met first up. New Zealand won that game, but South Africa ultimately, they had the luxury of the teams in their pool to be able to just pick up the pieces and confidently make their way to a quarter final. Whoever wins this weekend, do you see the other side being able to confidently pick up the pieces ahead of the knockout stage? Like, for example, if France lose the home opener for themselves at the tournament, Is it a bit different to South Africa losing in 2019 where they were still coming in under the radar? Is it a bit too simplistic to just compare 2019 to this?
I don't think it is, because I was even saying about Ireland, like, you know, losing a game, you'd hope it's just, well, I don't know if you'd hope this, but if you lose a South Africa game, you beat Scotland, you go to a quarter final, you're going to play one of those two teams anyway. Unfortunately, it might be France. At that stage, you could be saying, unfortunately, it's New Zealand. They could be hitting serious form and just all of a sudden just, you know, get into the form that we think they might have been hitting before that South Africa massive loss. But like, they were on a trajectory there that everyone was saying they were the form team, but they were down in Australia playing against an Australian team that we don't really know what's going on. But I think, you know, long answer short, Ireland, it's just unfortunate for Ireland that in one sense they get to cruise through Romania, have a good game against Tonga, hopefully, and then go at it against South Africa. But if they do lose that one, you're facing into, you know, a plucky Scottish side. Actually, not more than plucky, a very good Scottish side, very dangerous in attack. You're just hoping that the wind is out of their sails by that stage, and maybe that's the advantage of playing Scotland last. If they get a beating this weekend, which they could, then maybe they don't have enough to pick up the pieces. But like, if you're losing the first game, you're going to be able to lose a game like South Africa have shown, and pick it back up. But I think there was so much kind of togetherness and the story to be told, and Razzie was keeping them all together. You know, were they ever going to be killed by one loss? I'm not sure. In France, if France lose it, I think the confidence, the public will get on them. New Zealand, their confidence will go. Ireland will start questioning their game plan. You know, I think they're a bit more robust on that now than what they were under Joe Schmidt's guys, because it was very much laid out to them, and when it didn't work, it didn't work. But I do think you can go through the tournament losing a game and still get there. I think there's enough time, and you're going to be in such a tough quarter final anyway. Then you're going to have to pick up the pieces if you're going to go that long, you know.
Mm-hmm. Few more little bits to get through. Quick verdicts though. France, New Zealand.
I can't look past France.
Okay.
I don't think you get past it. I don't like I'm sorry. I prefer Jordy Barrett at 12, even though I don't think he's the full answer at 12. I think the game line that he brought against Argentina, I thought was just too hard to stop. I'm not sure Antonina Brown is doing it as much.
The Scotland South Africa is the late evening game on Sunday. I think 4:45 Irish time. It kind of goes back to something we touched on earlier on, where you were saying you don't expect Ireland to be trying to run up a score necessarily against Romania. Commenting to us on Twitter, Romac F says Scotland beat the Box this weekend, and the potential for a 3-win team to not make the quarterfinals grows exponentially. What are the odds? Now, I'm not necessarily saying Scotland will beat South Africa, but there's a possibility in this pool that, you know, we've 3 top teams in it, and one of them beats each other, and you have all 3 of those teams finishing up on 3 wins, and all of a sudden points difference becomes really, really important. Before we obviously just mentioned Scotland, South Africa, I mean, racking up a points total against Romania would be pretty important, just as a safety blanket. I know I know you're trying to get away from the mindset of accepting the fact that you might lose a game down the line, but
I think that's realistic. I think you have to go into the game going, we might lose a game here, and like, you know, I think you have to. I think the overly positive person will think, oh, should we just win the games anyway? And then you don't win the games, and it's like, you know, what's after happening. So I think you do have to think that way. But I think, like, the old cliche of the process and all that, I think if Ireland are looking for that cohesion, they're just going to run up that score anyway. If they struggle, I don't think they're going to force it to get the score through, because it's not happening. Like, you know, I think it's going to happen as a byproduct of how they turn up. They're so strong, you know. But like, I think you've mentioned it there. If Scotland loses South Africa game in the opener, they do have time to get there to dust themselves up and annoy Ireland a lot. You know, they do. They're so close to getting that win. So they're dangerous. But I just don't see them beating South Africa. They obviously had a very good game against the French in the second half, but that French team, it's not what we're going to see. Like, I don't think anyway.
So I'm getting the feeling, obviously, you think South Africa are going to have too much for Scotland this weekend. But as you pointed out, the fact that Scotland ultimately, if they win one of their 2 games against South Africa and Ireland, they'll more than likely be qualifying. So they do have the option of just going all out this weekend and throwing everything they have. I think we're probably going to see them go for it, similar to how they did away against France in Saint Etienne. And for that reason alone, regardless of who actually wins this game at the weekend, I just can't wait to see what Scotland are going to throw at South Africa, even if I do think South Africa will still have enough to deal with it.
They'll throw absolutely everything at them, because I think if you were in Scotland, I can't imagine them thinking, we're plucky
It's
losers.
as close to it's as close to a free shot as I feel like they could have.
It's a free shot, but I guarantee you inside in their camp, what disrespect saying we've got a free shot. They're expecting to win that game. Like, and in Scotland, they back themselves to win that and cause such an upset. They wouldn't see it as an upset, but like with Finn Russell, their centre is on form. They really cause a lot of trouble. But I just think South Africa, again, too long in the tooth. They're so good at tournament rugby. I just think they're going to squeeze them. They're going to outmuscle them. They'll probably put the ball into the maul. I just think they'll be too clever. They won't try and play. They'll squeeze that game down and stop Scotland from being Scotland, But I think like we're lucky in that we get to see that first, because unfortunately injury or red cards is going to be part of this game or the World Cup. And, from Ireland's perspective, if Scotland get a bit of a hammering and take some physical blows, sorry, not a hammering, because I don't think they'll take a hammering, but if they take like a beating and then a physical beating with it, one or two of those players, not that you'd wish for it, but if they don't recover, all of a sudden Scotland are looking like a different team by the end of the pool, So luckily they've got the hardest game first, and you might just be able to figure them out a small bit more. But it's going to be a cracker. I mean, like the two games, the one to start it on Friday night and the South Africa-Scotland game is huge. Like, I think you would back Scotland to cause such an upset if Finn Russell's on form. And I think South Africa do have one or two weaknesses. I don't think Manny Labaka is what they'd want in terms of their kind of tournament expertise, but the rest of it will carry. And I think their coaches are too clever, and you call them clever, but it's their mindset and their kind of psychological edge. I think they've got that one.
Yeah, it's going to be brilliant. I've almost taken up too much of your time. A few more very, very quick fire questions. And when I say quick fire, one word answers, answers are more than enough. The other couple of games this weekend that stand out: England, Argentina. Who's winning that?
England, but my head says England, heart says Argentina. I'd love Argentina to do that, obviously.
Thought you were gonna say heart says England for a second there. Wales, Fiji.
Wales.
Couple of tournament predictions then. Winner.
I can't say Ireland, like it makes me too nervous. South Africa.
South Africa. Where will Ireland finish?
I don't know.
You don't want to say it is the answer. Player of the tournament or player you're just looking forward to seeing the most? Because I think player of the tournament is too easy. You could just say DuPont. But who are you just looking forward to seeing?
Once France do the business, DuPont will get it. But Will Jordan, I think, is just so good. I hope he gets a good run at it, yeah.
What team will disappoint?
As much as I said England will beat Argentina, England will still disappoint, but they could get the squeeze on teams. It just won't be positive enough to get a bit of momentum with them. England. And
then last one, dark horse. And when I say dark horse, either to win it or just to cause a bit of a stir in the pool stage, pick off maybe a famous win without necessarily qualifying, but someone to just cause a bit of havoc at this tournament, some team to cause a bit of mayhem.
I'm contradicting myself, but Argentina to cause a ruckus in that group, and then Scotland as well. Two of them are the ones.
And Scotland.
I think just because of the way the groups are laid out, nothing is going to be that surprising.
Okay, I'm getting very concerned that you've predicted South Africa to win and Scotland to cause a bit of an upset. I'm getting worried here, Johnny.
Well, that's hedging my bets, you see, because I'll be happy enough if I'm right. Well, I won't be, but I'd love to be wrong. But like, I just think the upsets aren't going to. Like, they're all so straightforward. There's clear top two favourites in each group, although you have Scotland, who are the group of death, obviously, and then Argentina are such a good team when they get going. They're the only ones that could be considered somewhat of a dark horse with Scotland. I don't think the other ones are going to do much damage. Like people might say Fiji, but I don't know. I think not at a tournament.
Well, we'll find out more over the weekend, and I'm sure we'll be chatting to anyway. You'll have your column out on Tuesday as usual, and I'm sure we'll be chatting to you on the podcast as well over the next few weeks. Jonny Holland, thanks a million. That's it from the RTÉ Rugby World Cup podcast. Safe travels to all those heading over to Bordeaux either this evening or tomorrow or early on Saturday morning. We will be back for another podcast next Tuesday. We'll speak to you then.